Hi, everybody. Let's go ahead and call the work session to order. Josh, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, or I guess Richard, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, this work session is for us to consider the creation of a new historic district in downtown area. And we're just wanting to explore the possibility of establishing it. We're gonna be able to provide, you've gotten in your packets before, the information, including the historic inventory, the map with the keys and the photos, and some information about, and the legislation, the state enabling legislation, and our city code section that refers to how this process occurs. And I think we will all come to see, or I'm assuming we will just determine what the next steps are. And if a committee were to be established to look into it, the roles of the HPC as commissioners and as staff, and how we will get the ball rolling on establishing a new downtown district. And I'll just quickly go through. There's the map of the location. And some general photos to give you some ideas. Masonic, nearby Empire, the U.S. Bank buildings included, the IDNA, the gym, and there's a better name for that, but the building adjacent to gym, and a few of these other buildings. This building has been modified substantially on the exterior, so we will more than likely consider this a non-contributing in the district. And there you go. And that building is shown on the map to a degree, but it's not going to be considered a contributing building from what I recall. And I'm not going to scroll through 88 pages of historic inventories. They were just all in there for your perusal to get a further background into each building and why they are significant and why this is a outstanding boundary for a historic district. And we definitely, staff recommends moving forward with creating a historic district, as there's a lot of development happening in the area. There's the vacant parking, or not vacant, but parking lots that can easily be converted. And a lot of adjacent stuff is going to probably be gobbled up in the future. And we want to be able to protect this area in the process. That's all I have for now.
Thank you. Any questions for Richard?
So what are our next steps then? Can you just kind of go through that?
Yeah, from my assessment of the ordinance, I think it would be I think one of the better ways to look forward is, I think we discussed this a little bit, is to establish a subcommittee or a committee that within the commission that would liaise with me and staff and try to work through the process of generating the report, what the report looks like based on past reports that have probably been done for other proposed districts, and how to compile it together in something that we can present, because it's not in my brain perfectly right now, but I think our process is we create that, we notify P&Z because they would look at it and provide feedback, and they have a certain time period in which they can do that. And then we would present this to the council, and then the council would act on it, and the final product they would act on, and it would become a local historic district. I'm making it sound like this is a 3-day process, but it most certainly isn't. And so then that's kind of roughly the chain of events that will occur. So I guess the good place to start is to look into getting a group of commissioners together to start the process.
Is that something that we have to do on the record during a hearing, or is that something we can do right now during our work session or via email?
I'm looking over to Josh. Is that the,
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I think since we have the time at the work session right now, I think it's a perfect time to discuss, I guess, maybe your all feelings about this district, the viability, the importance of it, and then determine if you're going to move forward with preparing that report. Then I think preparing that report comes, the task of a subcommittee, for lack of a better term. That subcommittee, we'll need to work carefully. We'll consult our legal team about how to best approach that. Obviously, if there's a quorum, it would have to be an advertised public hearing. I'll see what the sideboards are for us to work within some sort of subcommittee. If it is a not majority, if there's not a majority of the commissioners on that, if we can accomplish that outside of regular work sessions. If not, if that needs to be a public facing process, we can set another work session for next month.
Okay.
And start to work through what that report. Code is somewhat vague about what that report to P&Z and ultimately council that you all prepare looks like, but I think it would be an evaluation of the properties, their significance, how much of the district is still intact, what the integrity is, and then put some metrics to that. And then ultimately that would guide your decision about whether you would because there will ultimately be a public hearing that would be advertised that the commission would need to act officially in order to forward this on to council. And that would be after these reports are evaluated. The viability of the district is confirmed, and you all have come into agreement that that's the way to proceed.
Okay, great.
Madam Chair, I had a couple questions.
Please.
Richard, my first question is, can you go to the map page and kind of just, I think that was slide 5.
All right.
Can you walk us through exactly what you're going to be defining as the lines of the district?
Yeah, sure. It will be like from West Bannock, mostly along 10th Street, 10th and the Street, down from West Bannock down to the south side of West Main. I'd say the west boundary is to the buildings west of 11th, and then to the it's going to pick up that building, and so that's roughly the boundary. The red line is the boundary. The color coding indicates if it's NR listed, it has the pink, and and then the other, if it's been shown to be eligible, unevaluated, or ineligible are by dots.
And so what's
the number
happening?
of buildings?
What I didn't understand was the Royal Plaza. So that would not be part of it
What is that?
because that's outside. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's outside. Yeah, that's
okay.
outside of the boundary. That's the one that has the recessed.
The recessed
or,
front.
Yeah, recessed front.
But even though you've marked it as eligible on here, you don't think it's eligible any longer?
I can speak to that if you want me to, Richard.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So the NR boundary is that pink shade, and that pink dot is actually a previous building that's no longer
Right.
there, that was listed in the National Register. It was torn down some years ago and replaced with the Royal Building.
Okay.
Right.
Just show records haven't been updated to reflect that. It's no longer there.
Got it.
Yep.
And then my next question was, have you talked to the owners of these buildings at all about whether they want a historic district? Because I saw in the process, there's at some point a comment period, but I would think if we're going to create a historic district, we'd want to know that we have buy-in from the owners of these buildings before putting in a different district on top of them.
Right. That would probably be a good idea. I'd have to reread the ordinance in detail to what degree they would have to be informed, but we would definitely won't buy in for sure, regardless of what the code says.
Richard, can you also discuss like how many buildings currently have facade easements and things like that?
Oh, okay. I did have that somewhere in my, I don't know that it's on my drive or on my, so I don't know if I can pull that up readily, but I did do an overlay that I unfortunately I cannot access right now.
Okay.
But I did do a map that showed all the layers.
So there are currently 17 proposed buildings in this district. 3 of them would be non-contributing. 5 of them already have overlays on them, which means the owners have already some restrictions what they can do to the facades of those buildings. Partly the reason why I want this district is because it has some of the most substantial commercial buildings left in the downtown, in our downtown. And it could also allow for the opportunity, if they have a project, to engage the tax credits to get 20% off their rehabilitation cost. And many of these owners, as for 5 of them, already have facade easements on their buildings. And then the other ones, I think, are so substantial to Boise's history that if we lost them, it would be a great tragedy. And so for me, this district, sort of like the East Main district that was a couple years ago, I think it's a little bit less about the owner buy-in and about preserving Boise's downtown commercial history.
I'm not disagreeing that these are all meaningful buildings to Boise, but I do think that owner buy-in is incredibly important if you're going to institute new rules on people. You buy a building with a certain understanding about what you can and can't do with it, and then to change those rules on somebody after purchasing it is a big decision and is a big impact. It's going to have a big impact on them. So having their buy-in, I think, is incredibly important. These are clearly important buildings, and when people bought them, they probably understood that. But, you know, it's incumbent on us as a commission to make sure that we are getting everybody involved and not just doing what we like because we think these are pretty buildings. Like, we have to make sure that the entire community is being addressed as part of it. So I would really push for understanding what the owners of these buildings are thinking before we go down a long process. Because if we don't have a lot of ownership buy-in, I think that that's going to be a big uphill fight for us.
I would agree, Commissioner Otter. I do think that it's part of the process per the code of developing a new historic district that's required in order for us to move forward. And my thoughts are that I would love to see this happen. And I think that is part of the very first next steps that we take, is reaching out to the owners of the building or the buildings in the proposed district, seeing their thoughts and, you know, considering those as we decide to move forward. Any other thoughts?
I would agree with that. You know, I think property owner buy-in is important. I think perhaps before that step, there is that sort of getting our ducks in a row as a commission first to clearly understand this is a great report to kind of understand what's there, but sort of that next level of understanding that this is what the commission would like to see, and then talk to property owners to see if that is in their realm, because in essence, this is a zoning change of sorts, right? Yeah. And I would, you know, as a property owner, I would want to be very involved if and when that were to happen to my property. So.
And one way I'm going to put on my old hat working at the Ohio SHPA as a tax credit reviewer, one way to help to get buyer owner buy-in or support is to have somebody maybe like me trumpet the value of the historic preservation tax credits and how that adds a layer of protection that through local codes we can't look inside. But with tax credits, not only would the exteriors of these buildings be preserved, but the interior would have a look too, and they would get a great financial incentive so long as they meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for all the work that they propose. And I believe this state has very few tax credit applications, and anything that can help to boost that would be a win for the owner, the tenant, whoever would want to do the tax credits, and it would be a win for the preservation of the exterior and the interior of the buildings.
And I think part of that is compiling a sort of report or packet or presentation that highlights other cities where a commercial district such as this has been very successful, and what that looks like to sort of help build the vision instead of, oh, we just want to put all these restrictions on your property. Congratulations, right? To make it a kind of an understanding or create the vision of what it could look like.
There are opportunities with requirements.
Right.
And
And I think even the notion that 30% of our historic districts in the city of Boise are commercial historic districts, that's, a really great visual to compare to. When you look at Hyde Park, you look at, Hayes, and you look at Old Boise, those are great examples just within our own city of what it could look like. I do think, to Commissioner Park's point about having our ducks in a row before we approach the property owners would maybe be beneficial to us. So perhaps, I guess asking, are there any commissioners who would like to participate in a subcommittee regarding this?
I'll participate since I brought this to staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Any others?
I would be happy to participate.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. I would also be willing to participate. And I suppose we can revisit this discussion maybe via email from staff sent to those commissioners who are not here, if they'd be willing to participate as well. And I guess are there any other steps that we should maybe take while we have, time now?
I don't know for sure that there are. I just think that I think that we've got. It was good to present it. It seems like we're all in favor of it, with some caveats, especially getting the property owner buy-ins. And I think we can go from here. And as you say, I'll request that we'll let the other commissioners know and try to get. And see if they want to be involved in this committee, and we will proceed from there.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard. Moving forward, can we review our agenda for this evening?
Absolutely. So, Madam Chair, members of the commission, item number 1 has withdrawn their application. Item number 2, we will hear that one. Item number 3, Nina would like to comment on this briefly. I think other than that, the applicant and staff are in agreement. So if you want to, we could move that one ahead of number 2 just to get it out of the way quickly, because I think there'll be more discussion on item number 2, just for the applicant on that one, just as a convenience item. Item number 4 is a deferral. There's a memo in the packet that would be to May 22nd. And then item number 5, we will definitely hear. And then this is probably a good time to mention that there's messaging on the website. We'll work on getting the word out more, but there will not be an April hearing. The Monday our hearing falls on that was taken for the zoning code rewrite hearings at Planning and Zoning Commission. And then with an early hearing in May because of Memorial Day, it doesn't really make sense to push ours into like the first week of May, because there'll be a hearing a couple weeks right after that. So we're going to cancel the April hearing.
Okay, wonderful. Any questions?
I'm going to have to recuse myself on number 5.
Okay.
What was that?
Oh, I have to recuse myself.
Okay.
The city's using HUD funding and I reviewed it as part of work.
And just as a clarification, we are barely at quorum, so having a recusal does not jeopardize our quorum.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
Any questions for staff? Okay,
Okay, we'll get started again at 6.
excellent. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I am going to go ahead and call the Historic Preservation Committee or Commission meeting to order. Christina, would you please call the roll?
Pape. Koski. Maroney. Montoto.
Here.
Malloy.
Here.
Otter.
Here.
Parks.
Here.
4 present, 3 absent.
Thank you. Before we jump into our main agenda this evening, I do want to announce that there will be no April hearing this year due to the zoning code rewrite hearings. So our next hearing is scheduled for May 22nd. Moving forward, have all the commissioners had a chance to review the minutes from the February 27th hearing? Any discussion? Can I get a motion?
Madam Chair, I move approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second from Commissioner Otter. Christina, will you please call the roll?
Montoto.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Otter.
Aye.
Parks.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
We will not have a consent agenda this evening, but we do have a couple of items to address before we jump into new business. Item number 1, DRH 23-00021 at 1115 North 10th Street has withdrawn their application. So we will not be hearing that item tonight. And we also have a deferral on item number 4. That's DRH 23-00048 Scott Noriyuki at 1721 North 7th Street. Is there anyone tonight that is here to testify on that item that will not be able to make the May 22nd hearing? Doesn't appear so in person. Anyone online? Great. So therefore, I move to approve, I move to defer item number 4, DRH 23-00048 to the May 22nd hearing.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Otter. Christina, will you please call the roll?
Montoto.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Otter.
Aye.
Parks.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. We do have 2 applications tonight that seem to be heavy with public testimony. So out of convenience, we will be moving item number 3 to the first item we'll be hearing tonight. So we will first start with DRH 23, -00044 Byron Falwell at 1101 North 22nd Street. And Richard, may we please have the report?
This is a request to approve the construction of a single-story ADU on property. It's in the north end, and the existing house is contributing. Here's the site map aerial to give you an idea of where it's located within the north end. This is the front of the existing house. This is the side yard of the existing house with the border or box indicating the general location of the ADU, and we'll see it more clearly with elevations. A general idea of the neighboring properties to get a sense of scale in the vicinity. This is the alley looking towards the north. And here's the site plan. This fence here, shown here as a new fence, will be referred to later on. Just thought I would point that out. And there'll be more information about the pergola and a seating area and a little cook area here that came to me recently, I believe definitely after your packets. Here's the floor plan of the ADU and the elevations, as you have seen before. And then I recently got some additional site views indicating the pergola. It's something I requested, but I did not receive in time. And another idea of where the pergola will be. One more view and aerial overview of where it all sits. And got us some comments from Nina about the trees, and a representative from Nina will probably be speaking of this during the testimony phase. As I said, this is a one-story ADU. It will be about the same height, or should be the same height as the existing house. Utilizes the existing design motifs of the house and the detached garage. And because it's under 1,000 square feet and 22 feet in height, complies with the full, it complies with the setback requirements of the zone anyway. And the pergola, seating area, and grill all meet setback requirements. And as I mentioned before, when I was showing the site plan, the fencing shown on the site plan will not be installed as the new fence would encroach on the ACHD right-of-way. However, this may not make a lot of sense, but it's true that the existing fence will remain, and I believe it can. That's my report.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present? Hi, please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 20 minutes.
Byron Falwell, 199 North Capitol Boulevard, Boise, Idaho. Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about the Woodring ADU project. It's been a pleasure to work with the Woodring family these past few months on designing a right-sized ADU to provide flexible living space for their family members, both older and younger. As we all know, affordable housing choices for retirees and young adults alike are very hard to find in Boise, and this project will bring housing stability to the Woodring family far into the future. The outdoor covered patio is designed to provide functional connectivity between the ADU and the main house, while providing cover for all-season outdoor living. The patio structure is centered on the ADU facade, and common materials provide a cohesive architecture within the site. Patios like these not only provide for the health and wellness of the homeowners, but they also support vibrancy, life, and social connections within the neighborhood as well. We hope that the commission agrees with the intent of our design, and we'll now stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Falwell. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Is the Registered Neighborhood Association here to testify? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 20 minutes.
Madam Chairwoman, Sandy Herman, 1404 North 7th Street. The Nina Historic Committee has a concern about the existing tree on the north corner of the existing garage building. It is our preference that that tree be pruned rather than removed, particularly in light of the complete redesign, removal of the existing landscape currently. We request that if the tree is not able to be saved, that new trees be planted on the south side right of way and backyard to equal the caliper of the existing tree. We estimate this fairly mature tree to be about 12 inches or a little bit above that. The quoted size in the plan is 6 inches. And then our one other comment is we were a little bit fuzzy on the lot coverage. We estimate it closer to 34% with the patio cover, which is still under the 35% limit, but probably worth clarification. We think there might be some discrepancy with whether the fenced in right away is being factored in. That's all.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, thank you. All I had was Mr. Falwell here to testify. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to testify? It looks like we have someone online.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Please state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Mike Maxfield, 1112 North 22nd Street. I apologize, I'm not on video. For some reason, I can't get that to work, of course. I am directly across the street from Mike. We've known them since they've moved in. They've been great neighbors. I don't really have a whole lot to say here other than the fact that I pulled up their plans from the PDS, and I really appreciate that the ADU that they're proposing is, it's fully off of the street. It's almost not even visible at all from the street. It seems like it's a very appropriate size for an ADU. It's what it is, like 600 square feet or so. The style seems to match the house. I think in total, I'm not really sure where this is going to go because I haven't seen the commission's feedback on ADUs in general, but growth is coming, and having some responsible growth in the area where we have a good fit of a relatively small additional ADU. I think that kind of locks us into appropriate structures versus folks, doing crazy stuff and tearing things down. So, and I appreciate they're leaving, some of the original, garage that's there and whatnot. And it sounds like there's some debate on some details elsewhere. I'll let you guys work that out, but the ADU itself looks great, and we appreciate them as neighbors. And I think it's very appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maxfield. Any other members of the public wishing to testify on this item? Okay, Mr. Falwell, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it's completely acceptable to the owner to try to retain the maple tree that's on site that's next to the garage. That was shown as a tree to be removed because of how close it is to the planned ADU. We will do everything that we can to save the tree. If we're unable to do that, we certainly are amenable to replacement on the south side in the right of way as suggested.
Wonderful. If you don't have anything further, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Can you speak to the lot coverage and just clarify what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the lot coverage as it appears on the building plans on the site plan says 29%. And that was done with a calculation of building envelope only, calculating it with the covered patios. Thank you. Yeah. With the outdoor seating area and the covered patios, we're at 33.5%. So that's to clarify.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Falwell? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. We do
Sorry,
have a question. Commissioner Parks.
Sorry.
No, Commissioner
Madam
Parks, please.
Chair. I just want to clarify the pergola. In some of the renderings, it looks like a solid covering, and then some of the other documentation, it looks like more like what I would consider a pergola, where it's sort of open rafter, open truss. Do you know which is the intended?
Yeah. Madam Chair, Commissioner Parks, thank you for the question. In the site plan that you can see there, that is the outline of the structure. It is planned to be a full covered roof.
Okay.
So a flat roof with exposed structure below.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. With that, I'll go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing and would entertain a motion or some discussion. Okay, I guess I'll start with my thoughts. The clarification for the lot coverage answered that for me. And I don't have a problem with this application. I think it's a great project that meets all of our guidelines and criteria. I personally don't feel great about the potential loss of the tree, but I also don't feel like that's something that we can condition in the application, or I'm not sure I would feel comfortable doing that. If there were to be a condition put in, I would request a condition of replacement if in the event of any tree being lost, that it's replaced in kind. But other than that, I don't feel like we can condition them to keep the tree. But those are just my very rough thoughts.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner?
I feel fairly comfortable with this application. I mean, I think the ADU meets all the specs that we require in our design code. I understand the loss of the tree and the concern around that, but I agree. I'm not sure it's something that we can condition. I'm not clear. And I think we can indicate if you lose a tree that you have to replace it as part of the landscape plans. And it sounds like the homeowner is amenable to trying to keep it. So I'm not sure exactly what I guess I would be okay approving this with or without those conditions is kind of where I sit on it.
Thank you, Commissioner Otter. Any other discussion?
Yeah, and I really have no further thoughts. I think, height, size, form, shape, it all makes sense with what, for the size and location of it. The condition on the tree, I guess I don't quite understand. They've offered to try and keep the tree if possible. Great. And if not, then, replacement as indicated. So I'm not exactly sure what that condition would or wouldn't look like. And I think I would be fine, agree either way with that. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. Any other discussion or a motion?
I guess I will make a motion to approve DRH 23-0004 as recommended by staff. I don't have a lot of language for the tree though. Go ahead. Do you have language?
I was just going to second it.
Are we conditioning with the tree or
I
no?
was not going to condition with
Okay.
the tree. I was going to allow them to be good neighbors and work that out amongst them and Ina.
Okay. And Commissioner Malloy seconded. Great. Christina, would you please call the roll?
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Otter,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda tonight is item number 2, DRH 23-00039 EV Studio at 811 East McKinley Street. Richard, can we please have the report?
This is a request to approve the construction of a duplex on a property. This is located in the East End, and the classification is not really applicable as it is now a vacant lot, and it has past DRHs and certificates of appropriateness to put it in that condition. Here's the site aerial, still showing the residence that was since removed. This is the current existing site status. And here are some street views of the adjacent properties to give a sense of scale. You'll notice 2-story to the left and 1 and 1.5 story properties. And multifamily was adjacent or is adjacent to this site. Multi-unit buildings. This is, as I say, it's a duplex. Here's the floor plans. The elevations. And this house is, as mentioned, in a block or block areas of, they have a mix of single 1.5 story and 2-story structures. This building is going to be, most adjacent properties are 22 to 28 feet wide. This duplex width measurement is 33 feet 4 along the primary facade. And so staff deemed that it does maintain and blend with the width of the buildings on the adjacent site being only slightly larger. And the design guidelines state that it should use massing and form similar to neighbor buildings. And this design does meet that requirement because the size, due to its similarity in size as compared to previous applications for this site. And the structure is using design elements and roof forms, being more rectilinear now than it was as previously submitted in HPC. The roof form and other elements of the design and the narrowness have met these goals. And that, and with that, we recommend approval.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions for staff?
I guess I have a question, Madam Chair.
Please.
Richard, we've seen this property a bunch of times since I've been on the commission, and it wasn't a vacant lot when this whole situation started. And so I'm curious how staff thinks about the fact that it was a single family house at one point and is now, because they had to come multiple times after moving a building that wasn't supposed to be moved, a vacant lot, and how what staff thinks about that and how staff considers it.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Otter, I'll jump in since I handled those previous applications. So when the existing non-contributing home was removed without permits, the applicant was required to come back, obtain after the fact approvals for that. So they have obtained a certificate of appropriateness that was approved by this commission to remove that home that was there retroactively. The zoning ordinance allows duplexes in this zone, so it is an allowed use. And the matter before the commission is whether or not the proposed structure complies with the guidelines. Everything else has been either rectified or is allowed by right by the zoning ordinance.
Thank you, Josh. Any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present? Hi, come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you have 20 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Amanda Bidwell, 725 East 2nd Street in Meridian, Idaho. I have a presentation here. So we're presenting here today the McKinley duplex for certificate of appropriateness, obviously. Next slide, sorry. Oh, got it. So the proposed project is a duplex located here. As you mentioned, you have seen this site a number of times, and we've taken a lot of your feedback and incorporated it into this latest duplex design. The project does not include any garages on the rear, so there would be parking off of the alley to help reduce some of the scale. We're proposing pavers there instead of asphalt to blend in with the historic district a little bit better. The property building does now face McKinley, and we eliminated some of the odd angles from the previous applications, and then reduced the overall massing of the building as well. Each unit is 1,210 square feet, and there is an 8-foot step between the units to help break up the overall mass of the building. So as Richard mentioned, it is a little bit wider than the neighbors, but with that step, it helps kind of reduce that scale to closer to 16 feet. Landscape plan here shows how we kind of intend to screen some of the side of the building, which would be visible because of the angles of the street, and help reduce the massing there as well. Floor plans give a little bit of an idea of how this is laid out. I did aim to not have any windows looking directly into the neighbor's property, so they either face the street or they face the alley. The side windows are all high to prevent views into the neighboring properties. And then these are some of the elevation views, the street facing there. We did similar raised first floor with a covered porch on the front. And then that equates to a raised back patio that would step down to just kind of the covered, or not a covered patio, sorry, just the patio on the site plan. And then as you can see here, all of the windows on the sides are up high to avoid views into the neighboring properties. We are in agreement with all of the site-specific conditions of approval, and we're not requesting any variances with this application. So that will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Bidwell? Okay, thank you. Is the Registered Neighborhood Association here to testify? Great. Come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you have 20 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Sheila Grisham. I live at 1204 East State Street, Boise 83712. Tonight, I am speaking on behalf of Ina and a few residents that had reached out to Ina regarding the 811 McKinley application. I first want to say that this plan has improved considerably compared to the last two that, and we want to thank the architect and the builder for listening to our concerns from the last two applications. However, as I stated, a few residents did reach out to Ina with a few concerns for this application. One, the height of 28 feet will be higher than the surrounding houses, and this will allow the duplex occupants to look down into other neighbors' yards. There are one-story houses, 1.5-story houses, and 2-story houses in the neighborhood surrounding this area, but they were built in the early 1900s, so they're not nearly as tall. Is it possible for them to do a basement with 1.5 stories? Could that possibly reduce the height of this building enough that it would be compatible? With the addition of the basement, could they also get a little bit more square footage? So then it would be a compromise for all. With there not being a garage, could they build a carport or at least some storage outdoors for bikes, lawnmowers, that type of thing, so that there's a place to put that stuff? The walls creating the guardrails for the patios, could they be broken up and opened so that they didn't have such a massive look to them? And the last one was, could they add some detailed trim and overhangs that were more consistent with the historic character to blend in more with the surrounding homes versus having more of a, I don't want to be rude, but more, so it doesn't look like a subdivision house. So, and more historic. Ina is trying really hard to preserve our historic districts, and we ask that this commission, we would like your help in doing this. We are asking the commission to please look at the height, the massing, and the styles and the materials to ensure that we are not losing the integrity that keeps our historic districts healthy. We know that Boise needs housing, and we know that we are responsible for absorbing a percentage of that growth that we are seeing. But we would also like to keep the integrity of our historic districts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Mrs. Grisham? Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public wanting to testify? I have Dan Hutchinson. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and Commissioners. Name is Dan Hutchison, live at 102 North Jantoni Drive in Boise, Idaho. That's over on the east end, just off of Warm Springs a little bit. A little background on myself. I worked in historic preservation from 1972 until the mid-1990s as the head of regional offices, federal agencies on historic preservation on both archaeological and historic periods. And I just wanted to add that when we're looking at managing a historic district, we're looking at more than just a collection of buildings that have certain architectural styles. We're looking at the historic landscape, which involves the mixture of styles and mixture of uses within that historic district. And when we're looking at replacement buildings for ones that could have been considered contributing because it was more than 50 years old when it was left, continuing the same function and style and activity that was there historically is an important aspect. As the East End developed as one of the first subdivisions out from the core of the city of Boise, it wasn't a 1950 style, one builder built 1,000 homes. It filled in slowly and allowed for a mixture of mainly single family homes that were mainly owner occupied, but a number of them also were developed as rental units. And there are a few scattered historic duplex and other multiple family units in the area. But as we're managing the historic district, trying to keep that same balance, at what point does a predominantly single family, predominantly owner occupied neighborhood become predominantly a multiple family duplex, triplex, fourplex units with primarily renters? And that brings to the second aspect of managing historic districts, and that's the human element. The population that has thrived and survived in the East End for the last over 130 years has some historical significance in that it was family oriented, with areas for families to enjoy private, secure space for children to thrive and share, as well as the community aspects. And so continuing the same sort of lifestyle for a neighborhood is quite important for historic preservation. Otherwise, you end up with places like River Street, where we have one house preserved that no longer has any historic landscape, no longer has any historic community. It's just a monument to an architectural style of that period. And when we're looking at the historic landscape, we also have to consider the viewpoint. Where do you view that historic landscape from? And this particular property on McKinley Street, it's situated to where it's a predominant view as you drive up McKinley Street. This particular lot is the one that stands out the most. So I would prefer to see it as a single family rather than a duplex.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Hutchinson. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public wishing to testify this evening? Is there anyone online wishing? Oh, it looks like we have Amber Grant raising her hand.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Hi, Amber. State your name and address for the record, please, and you have 3 minutes.
Amber Grant. I live at 803 East McKinley Street. I am the west neighbor of the proposed plan. My opposition for this is primarily the congestion for any parking. That would be, I feel like that's kind of a dangerous intersection to begin with. And I just really want to make sure that that is really taken into consideration. Even if it's whether it's the back alley or it's front parking, street parking, it does get congestion. So anyway, that's to be considered, I hope. The other part is just the mass. The height of the house itself is I think a concern for the East End. Anyway, I just also hope that that's a consideration, whether it's shortening the ceilings or if a basement is an option. And I do agree with the gentleman that just spoke. I would love to see a single family home, just like the couple that moved in initially said that it would be, and has now come in with a couple different proposed plans that are making it multifamily. Single family home would be ideal. So anyway, I personally oppose the plan. I know a lot of our neighbors do. Just wanted to speak my mind on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public online wishing to testify? Okay, it doesn't look like it. Ms. Bidwell, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal if you'd like.
Sure, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So I want to touch on a couple of the concerns brought up by people that have brought testimony tonight. Views to the neighbors I touched on. We did look at that in the design and only put high clear story windows on the side so that we aren't looking directly into neighbors. As far as the height and a basement goes, I don't know that the owner would be amenable to a basement, but the height does fit in with the surrounding neighborhood. As staff mentioned, there is a 2-story house directly next to it. And we did not go with tall ceilings like are in a lot of modern homes. So we did try and keep with the same scale as the historic neighborhood. Exterior storage, I think we would be amenable to a condition to supply some exterior storage. We had not provided it as we were trying to keep the massing of the project down, but we would be okay with adding that back in if it was a condition of approval. I know there's a lot of concern about bringing a multifamily building into this neighborhood. There is precedent for it, and it is a duplex. It's not multiple units. It's just 2. And as far as parking goes, we did locate all of it on the rear of the property to try and keep it off of the street. And we wanted to provide enough parking so that it didn't, the property didn't sorry, the project didn't take up additional street parking in the area. So we did look into that as well. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Bidwell?
Yes.
Commissioner Parks?
Madam Chair, question about the neighborhood had mentioned the railings on the front porch of the house and possibly addressing the solid sort of massing that they present. Is there anything that you might address to that?
Yeah, we had gone with solid wall because it matched a number of the other houses in the neighborhood, but would for sure be open to a railing there instead.
Also, the architect in the room, looking at the front facing elevation of the house, the second floor windows are both sort of offset from the sort of the center lines of their massing, which seems more of a modern interpretation as opposed to something that's centered in the massing. It looks on the plan like those windows could be adjusted where they are more in the center line and more traditional form for the sort of house or structure. Is that something you might be amenable to as well?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Parks, yes. If it works with the floor plan of where the bedroom walls lay out, then yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Madam Chair,
Please, Commissioner Otter.
how tall is the two-story building next door?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Otter, I don't have that information on me. Sorry.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair, I have another question.
Commissioner Malloy, please.
What several of the neighbors asked about the 1.5 story with a basement. Is that possible? Is that something that the owners are willing to explore?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Malloy, is that something that we would need to come back with another application with a complete redesign on that? Or I don't know that that could be conditioned.
No, it can be conditioned. It would have to be probably come. I don't think we would agree to an entire new design.
Without seeing it.
Yeah.
I think he would be okay looking into that as an option if you weren't okay with the existing application.
Madam Chair, I have another question.
Please.
So you've got one building which is 2 stories on one side and the other buildings around it are all 1 stories. Are there any other 2-story buildings within the vicinity of this duplex? Like on any of the other sides?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Otter, yes, there are other duplexes not, or sorry, 2-story buildings not directly adjacent, but within the neighborhood.
On the same block but nothing else adjacent? Is
On
that
the
what
same
you're
block,
saying?
nothing- Yeah.
And Commissioner Otter, if I may, I might have the answer to your question. I actually live on McKinley, further west, and the majority of the 2-story houses are actually 1.5 stories. And many do have basement or cellar cellars within them. So I do believe that the one directly to the east is a total 2-story.
Both sides for what I've thrown up onto the presentation. On both sides of this site are 2-story structures.
Okay, my understanding was the brick house was a 1.5. But I could be wrong.
To the right.
But hopefully that's helpful a little bit. Are there any other questions for Ms. Bidwell? Okay, thank you. With that, I will go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing and would entertain some discussion.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Malloy.
It is improved. The design has improved since the last 2 times we've seen it. And but I still think there's room for improvement. I know Richard said that it's close. The width for me is too wide still. If most of the houses are 22 to 28 feet wide and the average is 26 feet and this would be 33 feet wide. It's just still too large. I don't mind it being a duplex. I think it's great to add, multifamily home into this lot, but I think the design is not quite there yet. I think there's room for improvement for the width of it and also the height.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Any other discussion?
I would just, I think I was trying to get a handle on the height and some of the concerns around the height itself. One thing I would say, yes, the design is, I think it's much improved. I am more inclined to think that it's approvable at this moment in time. I think that one thing that I do appreciate that they've done that does impact the height is raised the ground floor up off the grade plane. That's an important characteristic of our historic districts and something that is not often seen in more suburban areas. I think the form, they've done some nice moves to address the width in the way that the form is subdivided and set back. And I do appreciate that. There are a couple of moves that I think would be nice to make, the windows and porch railing, that sort of thing. I would be curious to see what a 1.5 story with basement would bring to the table. But I'm not particularly opposed to what they presented here this evening either. So,
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. Any other discussion?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Otter?
I'm just struggling with the height. I can't get a sense for what the 20 feet looks like in comparison to the neighbors. And since Ina and the neighbors all had concerns about it, that makes me concerned because none of the drawings have any relative heights on them. So I can't tell relative to anything else what we're looking at, which makes it really hard I don't mind the duplex. The width is a little bit more than I'd probably like, but otherwise I think that they've done a nice job here with the concept of a duplex. So I just really would like to understand what this does to the neighbors.
Thank you, Commissioner Otter. Yeah, my thoughts are pretty much very similar. I do have concerns with the height and the precedent that could set. I already have concerns with the precedent that this entire situation can set. But given the fact that the neighborhood association and the neighbors have concerns with the massing, I'm just not comfortable moving forward. To me, the design really has evolved, and I very much appreciate that. But in looking at, the front elevation, it still looks like a big house to me. And this lot is really tricky to work with. It's awkward and funky. And I think it would be difficult to distinguish if you're just driving or walking down the street without standing in front of it, you wouldn't know it was a duplex. And that, to me, I don't know. I just have some concerns with the massing and the width contributing to that. I do want to say that I really appreciate the landscape plan that's in here. The landscape mitigation plan for this lot was not followed. Initially, it's been dead for a year. The lawn's been dead for a year. And I think that it's incredibly detailed. So I think it's great that the applicant did due diligence to that point. But given the concerns and testimony of the neighbors and the neighborhood association, I don't think I can support this application as is. And with that, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Malloy.
So would you entertain a motion for a 1.5 story, potentially with a basement? Or are you more on the lines of Commissioner Otter, where you want to see renderings of the house next to the 2 current homes?
I don't feel like it would be right for the commission to approve a scenario that we haven't seen in front of us. So I think that I would definitely be interested in seeing a 1.5 story in a basement and how that scale looks on the lot. I don't know if that answers your question.
It still leaves me with to make a motion of, but I'm like you, I'm concerned about the width and the height of it, because we've seen a lot of new construction in the historic districts in the last 2.5 years I've been on the commission, and some of the stuff that is being built in our historic districts, it is not pretty. It's too large for what's historically there. It doesn't meet the massing form and everything that we should be seeing for new construction in our historic districts. You drive down the street and there's so many large homes that you think would be in, Meridian. Like, a lot of these historic homes were only 900, 1,200 square feet. And we're putting on like a 3,500 square foot house on these small lots and in our historic districts, and they just don't belong. So I don't know. Maybe somebody else can make a motion, but I'd like to see at least a rendering of the house proposed next to the current homes, or a 1.5 story house on this lot.
So I guess just to, I don't know, brainstorm potential ideas, we could deny the application before us. We could, I think, technically defer the application and be specific in what we want to see. Or we could approve the application with some conditions.
I guess I would almost ask the applicant, would you prefer us to I think at this point, you're going to get a deferral or a denial. So would you prefer the deferral or the denial?
Let the record show that the applicant said deferral. Okay, that being said, I guess I would entertain a motion.
Okay, I will make a motion to defer DRH 23-0039 to the meeting on May 22nd for additional renderings and potentially a 1.5 story example, whatever the applicant can come up with.
Thank you, Commissioner Otter. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Christina, would you please call the roll?
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Otter,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And our final item tonight is item number 5, DRH 22-00437, Belgravia and Old Boise Condominiums Association at 150 South 5th Street. Staff, may we please have the report?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. This is an appeal of an administrative approval to install a prefabricated standalone restroom facility in CW Moore Park, located in the Old Boise Historic District, one of our commercial districts. Vicinity map, the site is located on the northeast corner of Grove Street and 5th Street, and has been a public park, certainly for as long as I've been with the city, and for a number of years. There are adjacent residential and mixed use buildings surrounding the site. Some new construction across 5th Street to the west, which is completed last year. And then there is a number of existing historic buildings, including the Belgravia building directly across the alley to the north from the park. Some photos of the park as it exists today. And this photo does show the general location of the proposed restroom. Again, in this here, it would be located within the planting area outside of the alley, to the right of the telephone pole, and within setbacks of the site, which we'll get into a little bit more. Another view of CW Moore Park, just for some familiarity of setting. So the site plan, they propose to construct or install a prefabricated restroom outside of the front and alley side setbacks. It would be located approximately 23 feet from the front setback along Fifth Street, and then 11 feet 6 inches off of the alley, which exceed the required setbacks in the A1 zone. Just to kind of set the stage for the appeal. So appeals of administrative decisions are open records before this commission. There is not a limitation on new information, not a limitation on who can testify. So it varies maybe from some appeals you've seen before City Council where they do have a more refined closed record. So the commission tonight is charged with making the decision of if the certificate of appropriateness meets the ordinance findings and complies with the commercial guidelines. It is not a finding of error in the decision or anything like that. It's like an open record, like a new decision that is before you tonight. So the site plan with the proposed restroom, again there. Elevations of the facility, it is a prefabricated facility made of steel with a contemporary design. It has louvered vents at the floor and ceiling to provide ventilation and visibility into the structure for security reasons. The applicant provided a sample of a recently installed restroom in the Sherry Buckner Webb Park in downtown Boise that would be similar to the proposed facility in C.W. Moore Park. So in the commercial the commercial historic guidelines, there is minimal guidance when it comes to accessory structures. In section 213, it does talk about what is generally appropriate and then what is generally not appropriate. In that this is a public park with no primary structures, much of the language in the guidelines are revolve around making accessory structures compatible, secondary to the primary structure. This park does not have a primary structure, so there is minimal guidance in terms of what is appropriate. They are accessory structures are certainly intended to not visually compete with the primary features on the site, be set back from and secondary to any other structures. Maintain and blend heights of buildings and adjacent sites. This proposed structure is certainly much less massive than any surrounding buildings. These materials traditionally not used in the district is discouraged. There are certainly applications of steel within the district. This building is a contemporary design, which does differentiate it from the historic features on the site and does not permanently alter the site in terms of its historic significance. So with all of those findings in mind, we did approve the installation administratively, which was subsequently appealed. I know that the appellant is here tonight, the applicant is here tonight to speak to you, and I would stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Any questions for staff? Okay, great. Is the appellant present? The appellant is the one who filed the appeal. Great. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 20 minutes.
So Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Matthew Reese. I'm at 499 Main Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702. I'm here tonight to speak in opposition to the proposed Portland Loo restroom at C.W. Moore Park. I come before you as the board president of the historic Belgravia building, which is adjacent to C.W. Moore Park and would be within 30 feet of the proposed Portland Loo restroom. I also come before you as an owner of 2 condominium units in the Belgravia. My personal opinions may or may not be the opinion of other Belgravia owners, but to be clear, we are in agreement that the proposed Portland Loo in C.W. Moore Park is not appropriate. Also here to speak is Victor Miller. He's also a member of the board and he's also a unit owner in the Belgravia building.
If I may just interrupt you, just one clarifying point. You can share the time between the two of you.
Okay.
So you can designate that as you wish.
Right.
Or if you want to use up the majority of the time, he can testify for 3 minutes as part of public testimony.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Good. And if time needed, technically, I could probably come back as a unit owner or not.
You'll also have rebuttal time. Yes.
So, so we can have a discussion on just the narrow aspects of the historic preservation laws and how this proposed Portland Loo is not appropriate. We can also maybe have a broader discussion, albeit this is probably beyond your jurisdiction as a historic preservation commission. But a discussion of the proposed use has a high probability of changing the use and character of the park. And I think that should be part of your jurisdiction. So a little bit about myself. I'm an architect practicing architecture for over 30 years here in Boise. As an architect, I or my firm has done many historic preservation projects, many of them in downtown Boise. I've been in my office at the Belgravia building for over 20 years. I park in a parking lot that's off of Grove Street between 5th and 6th, and I walk through C.W. Moore Park every day, probably 2 to 4 times a day. And I've been doing this for the past 20 years. So I know C.W. Moore Park. I know what goes on in the park. And I know that the proposed restroom is a bad idea. So C.W. Moore Park, the park itself is not a historic park. You know, Lincoln did not give his Gettysburg's address there. But it's a park that is historic themed with many historical elements within the park. And there are also many elements within the park that are not historic, but they have been all thoughtfully designed to be compatible with the theme of the park. The theme is complete and it's beautiful. And the Portland Loo is not. The industrial looking Portland Loo looks like an air conditioning cooling tower. As an architect, if I were to propose placing this aesthetic on top of a roof, the city of Boise would make me put a screen wall around it so you couldn't see it. There is no consideration at all to the design and to its surrounding. This is just a prefabbed industrial looking element just being plopped right into the park. If you're to design a Portland Loo for the Ada County landfill, it would look exactly the same as what you're proposing to put in this park. All the details in C.W. Moore Park have been meticulously thought through. I was not part of that planning, but you can see it. The lights are historic lamps. The sandstone work, not original, not historic, but thoughtfully designed to mimic historic construction. The benches were custom prefabricated cast iron with the logo Boise Historic Preservation Commission in those benches to make them look like a historic bench. The color schemes, again, they all blend together. They all belong. I can go down to even the surround around the trash container has been designed and historically themed to fit the appropriateness of the park. The joints in the concrete in the park are not just random. They are thoughtfully designed to mimic a sandstone layout. The proposed Portland Loo would drastically reduce a critical landscape buffer that creates a secluded circular design in the park. Gone is the separation from the alley. And gone will be one of the most spectacular magnolia trees in the city of Boise. What's going to be left? A big concrete pad in an industrial looking structure. There's no separation, there's no buffer between the proposed Portland Loo and our building. There's no buffer between the Portland Loo and the park functions. The Portland Loo is set back to where it doesn't have proper sight lines from the street. This is a tall order. How do you accomplish all these things? How can this be done? Well, it has been done. It was done at the Sheree Buckner Webb Park. They accomplished this. They provided landscape buffers between the functions of the park and the restroom. They put it in an appropriate spot with high visibility, which the manufacturer highly was their recommendation is how these things are supposed to be placed. The city can say, well, this was our best option. It's not. You have a much better option. Now, not to be a person that says not in my backyard, but you're currently planning a park 1 block away. That right now is a surface parking lot and has a much busier street. And you can start from scratch in your design, and you have the opportunity to place it and do it right. And create the theme and the style and everything about the park and make it work. What's proposed at CW Moore Park is very inappropriate. No consideration at all to the historic atmosphere that is in that park. We can talk about some stuff that's maybe goes beyond maybe your scope, but there are problems that I witness way too often. And it's that park has a transient problem. And there's a feeling that the restroom is going to make it more convenient to be in that park for longer periods of time. And it's my experience, when people start setting up tents in that park, it takes a while for police to come around. But when people start setting up in that park, nobody else will go in that park. And that's a big concern that I have. And I've, again, 20 years, I've seen the different phases. I saw the tent city at the Ada County building, lived through that. And we've had ups and downs in that park as well. And so that is another overriding concern is the consideration of what happens when the problem gets worse. And there's evidence that the problems do get worse when a structure like this is put in there. Yep, and I'd like to have Victor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you would just say your name and address.
I'm Victor
for the
Miller. I'm
record.
the 834 West Two Rivers Lane in Eagle. Thank you for your time. So I'm also an owner of 2 units, and I also am on the board. And tonight I want to talk to you a little bit about why I believe CW Moore Park is not the place for Portland Loo. So in researching this issue, I actually reached out to Portland Loo themselves. I actually reached out to the manufacturer of this. They were called Madden Manufacturing. And I asked them to send any studies that addressed the appropriateness and the locations of their loos in other cities, and also asked them to give me pictures of actual installations of their product in different cities. So reason number 1 that I want to talk to you about is that in a study that was done in Washington, D.C., the study that Mr. Madden sent me is called Findings and Takeaways for Washington, D.C. from a questionnaire administered to cities that had installed Portland Loo. Washington, D.C. did 4 different studies before they even considered putting this in their city. And I want to hand you, if you wouldn't mind, do you mind handing them this one? This is the actual study that was sent to me. It was written by Marcia Birnbaum, who's a PhD. And it is due diligence that Washington DC did. So first, according to this study, one of the most important keys to success of installation of the Portland Loo facility is what they call crime prevention through environmental design principles. So what are those? They are the Portland Loo should be open, visible location with a lot of pedestrian and vehicular traffic. Should be near a commercial area that eyes can be kept on it at all times, with nearby businesses and communities that have bought in, with good street lighting at night, and arrangements made by the police and others to monitor it. We believe the city of Boise's choice to locate the Portland Loo in the neighborhood C.W. Moore Park does not meet any of these crime prevention through environmental design principles. C.W. Moore is not open and visible. It is not highly trafficked. It is not near a commercial area. We don't believe any study has been done to find out the buy-in of the community and the businesses nearby. There's very poor lighting there. And we have not been apprised by the city of how it plans to maintain the Portland Loo or keep the location safe. That's the first reason. The second reason is that Portland Loos have created some serious issues that might not be in the right thing for this neighborhood park. In that study, it talks about issues that may arise, and these are the actual thoughts from cities that have implemented these Portland Loos. 1, locks broken, graffiti, inappropriate items flushed down the toilet, frozen pipes used for shooting up, possible use for prostitution. Given that shooting up in the Loos on frequently closed spaces like public restrooms, Washington DC may consider installing a needle drop, as many other cities have installed, Portland Loos have done. Cities where the problems are multiple include prostitution. They include sleeping inside. They include camping. In Portland, Oregon, where the Portland Loo is from, the city has had issues with shooting up. In Washington, Olympia, Washington, the city has had issues with graffiti, sleeping in the Loo, arson, replacing door hinges and hardware. And Monterey, California is issued with graffiti. Has the Historical Preservation Commission of the city of Boise thought about the unintended consequences and the relative cost benefit analysis of bringing a Portland Loo to C.W. Moore Park? We just heard testimony from some neighbors here about the impact of putting up a taller building next to their houses. Have you seen renderings? Have you seen one of these things in the park? No, we are those neighbors that are concerned with it, similar to what you just saw. The third reason is the location of the Portland Loo at C.W. Moore Park is inconsistent with actual locations of the Portland Loo in other cities. So I want to provide you with some pictures that I'd like you to pass around. So these pictures were actually provided to me by the Portland Loo Company themselves. Now in these pictures, what are you going to see? You're going to clear that the Portland Loos have been located in places with open sight lines, highly trafficked areas. Many are placed in very, very public places, like right near, you'll see like literally on the streets, right near sidewalks, right near crosswalks, literally in isolated places where it's the only thing you can see. Why? It's a safety. It's all about safety and being able to see what is going on in those Loos. C.W. Park is unlike any of these pictures that you see. Fourth, the location is too close to other buildings. As picture 1 through the pictures that you see there, Portland Loos are not installed in close proximity to buildings. As the pictures show, these pictures, also pass. These are pictures that I took. One of them is from the Belgravia building to the specific site, and the other one is from the C.W. Moore Apartments to the specific site. You're talking 20 to 25 feet. This is not how these are installed in other cities. It's just not appropriate in any way to be in that park. We talked about the aesthetics, but let's talk about its functionality. If you look in that study that I gave you, Look at how the other cities are talking about how they're being used. Cincinnati, the Portland Loo is being used 100 to 150 times a day. Miami, 250 times a day. Olympia and Portland, Washington, highly used. Salt Lake City, 100 times a day. San Antonio, Texas, 100 times a day. We have been next to that park. My units happen to be right next to that park. That park is a neighborhood park. It is not a destination park. You will not get the usage expected of the Portland Loo in other cities there. Lastly, I want to just mention is operational costs. I don't think that the Historic Commission has really considered the incremental cost that it's going to take and bear to have Portland Loos. So in these other cities, again, I've cited them from that very study I gave you. There's 4 costs: security, cleaning, needle drops, and maintenance costs. In Miami, Florida, for example, additionally, we highly recommend having the restrooms monitored. This is why we believe we have no issues. Police monitor was required in Arcata, California, Cambridge, Miami, Monterey, Olympia, Portland, Salt Lake, and San Antonio, and Vancouver. Most of these places actually, some of them actually have monitors the entire time they're opened. Have you thought about the cost of that? Needle drops. There's 7 of the cities, of the 13 cities that actually responded to the Washington, D.C. questionnaire. They put together a 5-page questionnaire. 13 cities responded, and 7 of them recommended actually installing needle drops next to the Portland Loos. Is that what we want in a neighborhood park? So the question I really have is, looking at that study, looking at the pictures, looking at what's happening there, looking at the aesthetics, looking at the fact that Washington, D.C. did 4 studies, not just from the historical perspective, but rather from all elements of the city services. Is this the only voice that Boise City should listen to in order to approve this for the city? In the questionnaire, they reached out to 28 cities, and one of the key takeaways was do the upfront work necessary to ensure the business and community support. Have you done that? Do we have business and community support? Has the City of Boise's Historical Preservation investigated business and community buy-in? Does the Historical Preservation Committee have any evidence that there's a substantial need or reason for the restroom in that park? Has the Historical Preservation Committee put together a budget for the incremental costs of maintaining, monitoring, needle drops, cleaning, policing? And if there is, I would like to see that budget. So for all these reasons, the company itself is telling us this is the wrong place. The pictures from other cities show this. This is the wrong place. The standards that other cities have used was not through Historical Preservation Commission. It was through the city services. I don't know of any city that used this method to approve this. You've seen the aesthetics. So for all these reasons, we believe that placing a Portland Loo like this in a neighborhood park with things from the 1900s, putting a 2023 steel Colossus in the middle of it. We're the neighbors. We need the renderings. We don't believe we think this is ill-advised. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I do have one kind of question statement. Excellent. Thank you very much. These submissions that you've provided this evening were not a part of your appeal packet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you
Because
explain?
I've done the work subsequent to that. So I reached out to the Portland Loo Company about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, that is helpful. Legal has informed me that the applicant has not received this information and that they're entitled to receive this information.
Sure.
Your testimony tonight obviously is here on the record, but without a formal vote from the commission, we do not have to include this. So as a commission, we can
by majority vote with consideration of the possible prejudice to other parties, the commission may A, reject these documents, B, review during hearing or during the hearing or recess, or C, defer the hearing until the documents can be properly reviewed.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner
can I
Otter.
make a comment? The documents didn't address anything that comes up in our historic code. And so my questions are more aimed at what this commission is in charge of, which is the historic code stuff. And so I think maybe, I don't know about the rest of the commissioners, but the documents are interesting, but they're not relevant to what we can or can't opine on.
Thank you, Commissioner Otter.
The document does deal with aesthetics, right? Which is what you do. It also talks about police and monitoring and needle drops and things like that, which I don't know, I think would be interesting to you. I mean, the aesthetics part isn't part of my testimony for sure. So the document is, I would say has very relevant parts.
Commissioner Otter, do you have a follow-up comment?
I guess the aesthetic part, yes, but I mean, we can see the aesthetics from the presentation that staff gave us. So there's nothing new to that for this discussion. If we have to take these documents into consideration, we would have to defer this, I think, until the May 22nd hearing. So would you prefer that we do that?
We prefer that these documents be seen and considered, yes, because this is the actual testimony of other cities that have done the exact same thing you have. And I think it's very valuable information. And also these pictures, which I was also given 2 weeks ago, at the same time I was given the study. I think those are very valuable because they show from a historical perspective where the appropriate location of these are, which is very open spaces, not historical neighborhood parks. So I think they're very helpful. Do you have anything to say?
So then Josh, I have a question for you. Well, she's talking, or go ahead.
I was just getting further guidance from legal. I missed what happened. I'm sorry.
They said that they want these documents on the record. So then at this point, do we continue this hearing or do we defer it? Because we need to give these to the city to come back with comments.
I think Chair Montoto may have some guidance, so I'll let her weigh in, then I'll
Yeah,
weigh in if necessary.
Well, it's by a majority vote, and considering the possible prejudice to the other parties in this appeal, my personal vote would be to defer the hearing until the documents can be reviewed, because in my just reviewing the summary page, I do think that this is some pretty significant data that the city actually may find incredibly helpful to this appeal. So that would be my vote. But again, it is a majority.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please.
For the record, James Smith, Deputy City Attorney. I think it might be helpful to the whole commission if I just recite for the record the portion of Boise City Code that speaks to this bit of process. Written testimony submitted to the review body during the hearing shall be accompanied by a one-page summary of the document, a statement of why the testimony or document could not be submitted by the deadline, and a request that such testimony or document be accepted for the record. The review body shall have the options of, so here is the code providing your options, rejecting the information, reviewing the information during the hearing, taking a recess to review the information, or deferring the hearing and or action until the testimony or document can be reviewed. So you're not obligated to defer to review. You know, this is all the options that you have. It goes on to say, the action to be taken on such request shall be by a majority vote of the review body. In deciding whether or not, I continue quoting, in deciding whether or not to accept the information, the review body shall consider prejudice to other parties if the information is accepted. I hope that makes it a little more clear for a path.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I make a motion to defer this to May 22nd? I don't think that we're going to have a chance to read this in a recess. So if we're going to accept it, I think we have to. So do we have to make two motions then? One to accept the information and then two to defer it?
So I think subject to hearing from anything from the applicant, I think it'd be fair to open up for any concerns or let the applicant be heard before,
Okay.
before, shunting the rest of the hearing.
Okay, great. So we will move forward, hear from the applicant, and go from there.
Am I all set? Am I done?
You are, yes,
Okay.
thank you. Is the applicant present? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. And does the applicant get 10 minutes in an appeal?
Oh, well, I was thinking that if your intent is to defer
Mhm.
in response to the request to submit this additional materials, that you might just get some input from the applicant before
okay.
taking up that
Oh, okay,
question now.
okay,
And the
okay.
applicant might have some
Excellent,
thoughts.
sure. Thank you. That being said, state your name and address for the record, and then we'd like to hear your thoughts on a potential deferral.
So my name is Jason Miller and my address is 9268 West Tanglewood, Boise, Idaho. And I'm with the City of Boise Parks and Recreation. I'm the landscape architect of record on this project. In regard to the statement, as far as deferment, I mean, from our perspective, this is a little bit concerning to us because the implementation of this project is based on a federal grant, which is likely to expire. So that's why we have in some ways, sought to expedite this in our process. Obviously, we have some concerns with additional information. We have done a ton of research. We have focused on a lot of different things tied to this project. So it's not, I don't think we would be overwhelmingly surprised by any information that we saw in the document, but that's kind of our opinion at this point.
Have you reviewed in your research the specific study findings and takeaways for Washington, D.C. from a questionnaire administered to cities that have installed the Portland Loo by Marsha Birnbaum, PhD?
So we have not looked at that specific study. Again, as a part of this project, we designed a sidewalk restroom. A Portland Loo is like one manufacturer of that restroom. There's actually two manufacturers. The primary manufacturer that we submitted in our packet was Romtech, which was the restroom. It's slightly different, but then they're kind of on the same approach. So again, we're taking a lot of information from one source that isn't necessarily the one that was in the design of the project. But as far as public restrooms, we've done a ton of research in regard to all of that in developing our design for CW Moore Park. I mean, I have more things I can respond to, but as far as like that specific study, I can't say for sure because we weren't focused on Portland Loo. We were focused on a restroom facility based on federal funding to provide an amenity to the community. And Portland Loo is one product in the whole, that, because they're very similar products, we have to, as a city and entity, we have to accept the lowest bid, and the contractor can really choose that project. All we can do is an equal. And so.
Okay. Are there any questions for the applicant?
I guess, would you say that the Portaloo is then equal to the, I don't remember, the Rombach? Is that what you said was the other option?
It's Romtech, and that was the one that we submitted. They are very similar structures.
Any other questions for the applicant? I guess I do have one. You mentioned that there's some urgency surrounding the federal grant funding that would pay for this installation. What is your deadline on that? When does that grant funding expire?
So we were to be under contract by around June 1st. So that's kind of why we're chose to proceed with this in the manner that we did. We did hold a public meeting before we chose to submit for certificate of appropriateness. At that public meeting, we went through our proposed design, which was a lot lighter impact to the park. And then we heard from the applicant or from appellant the concerns that were listed, and a lot of the decisions made in the current design package were based on concerns that were brought forward from then. And so we have held a public meeting prior to submitting this application. And
I do have one follow-up question. Since the ROMTech and the Portland Loo are similar in infrastructure, would you say that the components that would lead to a successful installation are similar to that of the Portland Loo? That location is key, and access to areas that are visible from the sidewalk and street. Would you say that they're similar?
Yeah, so the location that was chosen, the site plan. So originally we, right now we have about 10 plus events a year at CW Moore Park, in which we open it up for reservations. And that we're literally bringing in portable restrooms and setting them right on the alley. You could see that in the sidewalk that was shown there now. And so those those restrooms have to come in every time that facility is being rented. And with the new improvements being done along 520, not 521, but the Grove Street blocks, we're anticipating a greater demand on our rentals. Right now, our rentals are restricted Friday through Sunday. And we hope to be able to open up the site to do more in the future. But this restroom is, we feel like this is a better long-term solution. The location was chosen largely because of, one, we positioned it far enough away from the alley, which is further than the zoning requirements. And we did that in the location because all of our utilities are located at the kind of northwest corner of the park. So in order for us to kind of shift the building, to the south or further to the east even, it would greatly impact the integrity of the park even further. So we went from this kind of light scheme where we weren't going to impact the park very much at all, but we were kind of outside of our building setback to being considerably inside our building setback and making more of an impact than what we had originally hoped for the park. But the overall improvements for that restroom, we really can't position the structure elsewhere within the park without significantly damaging trees, benches. A lot of the historical elements that are there are rented from the Historical Commission, and those, we don't want to displace those for this structure. And this was the most open, visible location in which we could choose an appropriate site for this.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Madam Chair, I have a question. You said that you had originally a light version of this. Is that the version that you had the public hearing on, or is this the version that we're now looking at, the version you had the public hearing on?
So this was the version that we modified from the public meeting. We listened to the feedback. We said we recognized their concern about it being very close to the building. We positioned the building further inside the setback as far as we could without damaging the existing class trees that are there. So again, like all of our utilities are right at that corner, and that's kind of why that key location was chosen in the design.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Madam Chair, the appellant had made a comment about a significant magnolia tree that would come out as a part of this project. Is that, I didn't see like a demolition plan or anything. Can you address that?
Yeah, so there's 3 magnolias right now. There's kind of a bubbled out planter in the northwest corner of the park. In our portable restrooms, there's basically a concrete walk in between that planter and the alley, which is where we're putting our portable restrooms every time we need to hold an event. In our original public meeting that we did before we submitted this application, we had a small restroom basically going in that location so that planter was preserved, and we were able to keep the magnolias that were shown. Based on our research with the sight lines and improving our maintenance and access around the structure, that's when we position the structure further to the south inside the setback line. That caused us to we would need to remove the 3 magnolias that are there in order to do so. We are going to be able to plant one of them back, but there are 3 that will be lost, or 2 that will be lost as a part of this.
So you'll walk through the arch and you'll see the porta potty. You'll see the structure.
Yeah, it's a restroom, and it's, again, for the sight lines, the visibility, it is a structure that you will see within the park.
Upon entering the park through the arch, which was the main, which is a main feature of the park, in order to drive people in, you're going to put it right where you're trying to drive people to walk through. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is the location that we are going to put it. The other side, there's basically a cupola. We have a water wheel. We have, a colonnade, including lighting in the centerpiece. So there's really no other location to go within the park than the one that is shown on the plan.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry.
Madam Chair, sorry, keep catching
Please.
you at the very end.
Commissioner Parks,
Almost
please.
done. Yes, the appellant had also made mention of another nearby park that's being developed. Is that something you can address?
Yeah, I can definitely address that. So there's a park called 521 that's going to be located at 6th and Grove. That is a public park that is in the planning process right now. CCDC is actually developing the park to turn it over to Boise Parks ultimately. I encourage the applicant to provide as much feedback to the designers of that park as they have time to do so. It is not we don't really have a lot of control. Basically, it's going to be donated to us, and that park may be a good place for a restroom. It may not. Like I said, as Boise Parks, we try to provide restroom amenities for our community members. And the 521 park project is, it's basically, I'm sorry, so the 521 park project, we don't have any control at this point to determine the amenities that are within that park. The amenities within CW Moore, we chose to add this because we had the federal funding to do so. And we rarely get that opportunity to provide an additional amenity to the community from our internal funding sources. So that's plus the closest restroom nearby, public restroom, is actually Cherry Buckner Park, which is 9 blocks away. And so with the increase of activity in this area, and we had the opportunity to fund this, that's why we chose to do so.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. I guess legal, my next question would be, can we pause the public portion of the hearing for commission discussion?
Oh, Madam Chair, absolutely.
Okay.
And I think the what would be in order is just a motion to resolve whether to accept the document, I believe a SEPTED report.
Okay.
Document there,
Okay.
subject to what we said with the prejudice consideration and all that.
Okay. Okay. I guess before I make a motion to do that, since I have the written verbiage, I would take a whack at that. I will give some information as to why I'm going to make this motion. In just reviewing briefly this document submitted, I think that this has some very valuable information that the applicant would find very helpful in this process. As Josh mentioned, our job as the commission is to look at this appeal tonight from the historic standpoint. And I guess my personal thoughts on that are, this is a very special park. My son's preschool comes here every single day and they play, and the water wheel is their absolute favorite. It's monumental to these little kids. And I do think that having a restroom there, as you know, the mother of a preschooler, would be great, but I'm not sure that this
given this information and the potential visual impacts that this could have on the overall historic park, I'm not sure that this is the right option. And I don't feel like without reviewing these documents that I can make that decision right now. So therefore, I would like to make a motion to resolve and accept the documents submitted by the appellant with consideration of the possible prejudice to other parties, and defer the hearing until the documents can be reviewed for May 22nd hearing.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Otter. We do have to have a majority vote. So Christina, will you please call the roll?
Sorry,
Oh.
just to let you know, I'm recusing myself. I had a question for Leo. Can the chair make a motion? Yes. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. So that being said, we do have to have a majority vote. So that'd be, I guess we would, well, Christina, please call the roll.
Okay. Montoto,
Aye.
Otter,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. We will revisit that at the May 22nd hearing. And
Madam Chair, may I reclaim my pictures?
May, yes, please. And with that, I will go ahead and call this meeting to an end. Thank you, everyone, for being here.